So the art of the animated hotspot and other tricks to keep kids' attention. And you know, when I'm kind of going to run in and out of history here, kind of talking about the pieces, but I think there's a lot of stuff that we gathered that has to do with text and how do you hold attention and what keeps attention, and play, and how do you apply play and intrinsic motivation to keep kids involved in a product. So, as you've all heard or know, I started Living Books. I was an animator who went into the company because I knew I was going to have to try and talk a company into spending $1 million on a product for a market that didn't exist. And as an unknown designer, the best place to do it was inside the company. So that was certainly fun. I'd been there 3 months before I talked them into letting me create a prototype, and I'm going to show you some of the pieces that were from the prototype, because that's where we really did a lot of our learning. And then, you know, this is that piece about being early in the market. So when you're early in the market, you get the opportunity to be the first one there, and you get to be the one to be seen and create a brand. There's a lot of opportunities at that point. Of course, I kicked myself for not doing that when we came into the iPad and the iPhone. So, what we learned about kids' attention in text. Well, the first thing that we learned was that when something moves, your eye has to look. You can't not look. And that's because the media of our ancestors was the world around them. And the game they played was survival. And our ancestors are the ones who looked. And you know, you had to look because it might be something you were looking for or something that was looking for you. And it's running down in a deeper part of our brain where you hear a noise or something moves over in your periphery, you have to look at it. We do it instinctually. And the same thing is a lot of the ways that you can keep something on the page and keep kids involved is that you have something moving. And we'll talk about more of that specifically about text, but it really is, it's how they know something is alive. That's how they, you'll see it, I'm going to use that in Noodlewords, where I just wiggle the word. It sits on the screen and it just wiggles every now and then. It goes, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. And a lot of what I'm always looking for is play patterns. We're talking about play patterns. And I've been studying play patterns and pulling them out and saying, well, where does that apply? And why does that product do good? Whoa, look, it's got that play pattern in it. I didn't even think about that. And another thing about your eyes is that they follow the biggest movement first. So even if you have multiple things moving on the screen, you're going to follow the biggest piece of it. Now, when we're trying to create an immersive environment, a lot of times we'll have ambient animations going on. We'll have waterfalls and clouds moving, or a bird flying by, or depending, you know, or maybe a car driving by, with sound effects that give you the sense that you're in that space. But when we were first building things, we were running the whole. The early computers had 4 meg of RAM. 2 meg was the operating system. So we had to build all of Living Books. Everything that you see on one of these pages had to fit into 2 meg of RAM. And we did lots and lots of tricks to be able to squeeze everything down. And what we found was that if we had a lot of ambient animations going on, and then we wanted to run a big animation, that we'd step right immediately into latency on half of our programs. But we also found that if we turned off all of those ambient pieces, nobody would ever notice because they were following the biggest movement. And as soon as it was over, then the water would sparkle and everything would come back. But we could turn everything off and nobody would notice that everything had stopped because no one was looking at it. So, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You know, we've all heard this, and we know it's true, and we see how we're actually moving more into visual than we ever were before. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, about how National Geographic used to be all text with a few pictures. Now it's all pictures with a lot less text. And everyone's that way because it's the way we're taking our meter. We like it, and we're picking up, you pick up so much information. Text is perceived information. Images are received information. This is from Scott McCloud, who wrote a wonderful book on understanding comics. But text, you have to translate. It's a level of abstraction. So it's really our trick to keep kids involved in text is we have to keep getting them involved back into a level of abstraction that they want to go out of. They want to go out and look at the picture. They want to go play with the hot spots. They want to go do the things. And how do you get them back into having a relationship with the text and the meaning of the text? And that whole piece of, where I've been focusing some of, this last few years is on that piece where Warren was talking about before, of when you have a piece of text to a kids, it's just black and white. It's just black and white images, and they don't have any meaning. And how can you attach the meaning behind that to the image so that the two scaffold together, is that the word, right? And connect so that you, as in Noodlewords, wiggle wiggles and spin spins. So that when I was creating the prototype for Living Books, the first thing I did was we were using a beta copy of Director, and the first page of the book he's in bed sleeping, and it's in his voice, a little monster. Then when I got to the second page of the book, I needed 2 pages so I could show how a transition might work, as I'm still selling the idea here. And I had already put the highlighting text up and had it working across the screen, and I know that the kids would follow the highlighting text. And my goal, this is again, what is your goal? My goal was that this was also a reading product. It wasn't just a storybook. I wanted kids to have a relationship with the text. And in fact, in Living Books, I turned off the cursor until the words were read in the original product, so that they had to watch the text. And then we gave it back to them. In the current version, we have a whole set of tools for the teachers, and you can turn them off yourself. And but I also had this idea, because this was a whole new medium, and we hadn't quite figured out how are we going to do this. This is the first animated storybooks. So I thought, well, maybe he comes out on the stage like he is here. He steps in from the proscenium arch, and he tells you the story. I put on my overalls. And then I tested that with some kids. And what happened was, even though I had the highlighting text, all the kids were looking at his mouth. Because we go to the mouth before we go to the text. It was just a human preference thing. And so I had totally ruined my piece here. So I'll show you, I'm going to switch over. So this was actually my prototype that we sold this on. And it was interesting because my brother was in sales, and I was telling him how I was always doing demos. Everybody came through the company. In fact, that's how we got funded, was somebody came through and saw it. And he was giving me a bad time. He says, you're not in design, you're in sales. And I think that you have to do that. And
early in the morning, Mom wakes me and says, "Get up, little monster." It's time for school.
now, this is like the first prototype of an animated piece. To me, this is too slow now. And it's not quick enough. And there's a lot of things in here that I would fix if I could, but we can't, because we don't have access to them. And but it's really kind of interesting to see it. So what we did was, I'm going to go to the next page where we have at the breakfast table. So what we did was we had the text read, so they'd have to follow the text, and then we had him come bounding into the scene, screech to a stop, and land in the chair. So we actually had the kids following that and then following the second in sequence, and we actually got a better piece out of it altogether.
I put on my overalls and go downstairs to breakfast. Pop says,
"What will you have this morning? Eggs or cereal with milk?"
And so that was all interesting. Seems I'm running just a little bit slow here, but you can see we have our jaggy look. But all of this, everything on this page fit in. Now, one of the other things that we learned about the text, is that the kid who, you can click on the red ball and it'll play the whole story for you. But every word,
I put on my overalls and go downstairs
this morning. What we did was, we didn't just record the words separately, is that through all of our books, we recorded the words as they were spoken in the sentence. so that there's this fluctuation of what happened, and it's not like flat, 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 flat. It's actually the way it was read. And that kids were, the emerging readers were mapping the story. They were constructing the story by clicking on the words individually in a row. And you watch the 4-year-olds, they always go right down the line. And they click everything in a row on every page because they were building that structure for themselves. And the 7-year-old comes in, or the 8-year-old, and they click everything out of order. The wind blew up grandma's dress. Whatever the funniest thing is, I got letters several times from parents talking about the boys on the floor laughing from Harry in the haunted house, and they had clicked, the zombie has a stinky butt, and then dad wants to know, why are they laughing so hard, But that, for me, that's a plus, because now they're playing with it in a way I never intended them to or expected them to, and they're getting a whole different set of playing with it. And so let's see, let's have eggs.
May I have eggs, please?
It's cute.
Keep the animation cheap, right?
Now, if the child didn't know that you could make that choice, would the eggs start pulsing?
No.
No, kids usually.
They don't have a problem exploring. Once they get the concept that anything's live, and on an average Living Books page, we'd have about 30 to 40 animations, not including the text. So there's things hidden all over the place here. We were talking before about somebody was talking about having their kids and bringing your family into it. That when we did Living Books originally, this little critter here is my youngest son. I ended up being the voice of Grandma and Just Grandma and Me. This is I'm the baby here too.
Yep, I recognize it.
There we go. Darren's heard that cry before.
That was in the room next to me last night.
You heard that, I know. That's when my computer went down. Right? Okay, so I'm going to switch back, Darren.
Okay.
And let's see. He said, oh, you're doing it, actually.
I have a question. When did you release this one? Ballpark?
93, 94.
I mean, as an app.
Oh, it was just released last year. I mean, we released 7 of them last year. We had a busy time last year. And I'll show you a little bit about what we added. We added quite a bit of things to it. But I'm going to stick on the subject here. So, I'm a play advocate. And I believe that play is how kids naturally learn about the world. And it isn't just kids, it's all mammals. Bears, dogs, cats. They all play. They all play with objects. They all have mastery that comes from that. They develop their skills. They build social skills through play. It's hardwired into us. And so whenever we can align those pieces of intrinsic play or in a play pattern to a game, then we score. So Warren was talking before, we've talked about as having a traditional pattern with boys is you sit on the floor and you build things with blocks. And the next thing that happens is,
Smash them.
bam, you knock them all down, right. And they build them and they knock them down and they build them and they knock them down. And then you have Angry Birds. And here's a structure that's, if they show here's the structure, you're supposed to knock this down, that's the goal of the game. And that's like the boys just go, let me do it. And you could say the same thing for Toka Tea Party, is that I never have to explain to a 4-year-old how to use it. You just put it in front of them, they start moving things around, there's a little bit of highlighting to let them know where to go. And you put 2 or 3 kids, it's very social for 3 and 4-year-olds. And when we're testing, I always stick it over on the side and go, okay, you guys here, play with this. And then about 10 minutes later, somebody walks it back and they hand me the iPad back and they go, we washed the dishes. And they're very proud of themselves. And so those are intrinsic play patterns. Where can you find intrinsic play patterns? And I'll talk about some of the living books intrinsic play patterns. But kids are curious about everything. And we know that. And so what in your design feeds their curiosity? What sparks them? What makes it interesting? And this is the whole piece for me. If I'm playing and I'm watching my kids, I don't want them ever hitting the home button. I want them to go deeper. And then sometimes, kids will often teach us what they have expectations for. I had a prototype of a storybook of mine about Buzzy Bear. If I ran the zoo, it was a series of stories, and in one of the places you could feed different animals, and the cursor would turn to a piece of food, and the fish would jump out of the pond, and jump in different directions trying to catch the food. And we put it up. The first thing one of the boys did is he put it up at the top of the screen, and we didn't have it catch it. It would go up and down, and up and down, and up, and it would just, it would do that 20 times. It would just keep going until it moved. But what several of the boys said, and one of the girls said, is that, we almost got it that time. Whoa, look, oh. And so they kept imagining that it was going to get it. So then what we did is we progressively let it go a little. We made it do what they thought it was going to do, and on the third or fourth try, it would catch it. And then they were really satisfied. And then we found them they were experimenting with all kinds of other ways to try and make the fish jump. They were trying to make it jump off the land. But then and what we did is we put a frog over there who would eat food, and if you got the food too close to the frog's tongue, to go and catch it. And then they go, oh, but they knew there was consequences. So, in living books, I've been thinking about this, and I think that the play pattern is, I would call it turning over rocks. Because what you're doing is, it's like you're at the beach, and, ooh, what's under this one? Ooh, what's under this one? Ooh, what's under this one? And you're looking to see, is something going to wiggle out? And we have this, part of curiosity is that we're really drawn to anything that moves. Is it alive? It's alive, it's alive, So, and in digital space, it doesn't have to do much to be alive. It just has to wiggle. If it has a sound effect or it has something else fun to go with it. So, and I'll show you a little bit of Harry here, but these are my tips. You really want to use interesting content. Now this was a book that was designed for this medium. I had been working with Mercer and Arthur and finding books that had enough digital content. I tried to find ones that didn't have too much text in there. Berenstain Bears used to kill us because they had these
Big blocks.
Huge blocks of text, and then when you convert that to German or Spanish, it's like it gets this big. It was crowding everything out on the screen. But and also, how long are the pages of the book? We did Arthur's Teacher Trouble. Grandma and Me was 12 pages. Arthur's Teacher Trouble was 24. And, it was probably not the best thing to do because we could have put out 2 books at the same time we put out 1. But on the other hand, it was a great story. And we really had a good time doing it. So you start with good content. And as we've talked about, if it looks tappable, it should be tappable. No phantom buttons. Nothing that, is not just random, I'm going to make a few interesting things. If the kids think it's tappable, it should be. And in fact, there ought to be some that are surprises anyway, like the clouds in your product, that all of a sudden, and actually last night when we were looking at your product, we were having all the comments about, well, can I go in the barn? Can I click on the farmer? Can I, the kids in the group here were having their own desires about what should happen. You want to support the story as much as possible, and you need a really highly responsive environment, and you want to keep the animation short. In reviewing all of these living books that I've had to come back through, some of these are too long. In fact, when they came to me, the first thing they said, well, will you come back and help us create a new interface and part of be spokesman and getting them back out? And I said, okay, here's my test question for them was, I want you to make everything interruptible. And it wasn't before. And they went, oh. And then a week later they came back and said, okay, here. And that's what made me decide to go back and work with them, is because because I wanted to get out from under some of those long animations. And that was the problem when you get too big and you don't get to do it. You know, a big company where you got 100 animators and you're cranking out all these books at once. It's really hard to get in and really get a feel for them at the same level. And you have to save some room for surprises. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But surprise is really more of a key factor than most people consider. And we want to empower the user. That's the most important thing.
And I know that when I review something, I love surprises. I love to be delighted by something I've never seen before, and that's one of the things that I love. That's why I open up a new app, because I'm just hoping to find, it's like a box of chocolates.
A box of chocolates, and you want to bite in and see what's in there.
Yeah.
So you're feeding the curiosity, and if they know there's something going on. So one of the things that we added to Harry, besides the interruptibility, is that we didn't have navigation like this before, so we can just flip through things, and which really, I think every time I see somebody that doesn't have some kind of navigation that lets you know where you are, a bar on the side, a piece. I mean, Bob Stein had it in his very first product, and that people forget. You can so easily get lost. In Kindle, I get lost. You know, I don't know where I am. How many pages at the end of this chapter? I don't even know there's no page numbers. So there's no way to track things a lot of times.
It must have been a long time since anyone had lived there. There was dust everywhere.
So as Warren said, yes, I'm going to click on the train, and it's not mind-blowing. It's a little long for me.
Yeah, but a 3-year-old will get up and dance.
Well, and they do.
Exactly.
And there's a whole piece about dance. We'll talk about that. But now it's interruptible, so I can get in and out of it. Same thing with the boat. And then there's the pieces that are just fun, like the lampshade. You know, those are, we call them small. They're kind of throwaways, but it's just because it's live. And there's the hidden character, I think, is in this corner here. I don't remember. Oh, the fireplace.
See what?
So all the characters have dialogue that support the story. And sometimes they have multiple pieces of dialogue, depending on where you click.
And all is well.
So this page has 40, I think, buttons on it, 38.
Wow.
And they just go on and on. You know, I'm clicking on the.
But I still feel like I'm in that part of the story where we just came to this creepy room and
It's creepy.
it's all supporting that.
But the other thing that, you know, Living Books were always multilingual, and this story is actually in 6 languages, but we only have 3 here because they get kind of big and unwieldy.
Files.
Can I
Big
ask
size, yes.
a question about interruptible? Can I tap 2 and they both work at the same
No.
time? They break up.
One turns off the other one.
Okay.
It's too complicated because mostly because of the audio would overlap each other.
Yeah.
It's real confusing.
I could get my kids to do that.
That's right.
Tap one to turn the other one off.
So this,
I really like how you have the character react to what the child did too. Like, did you see that? You
Yeah.
know, on the, I think it was the fireplace one.
yeah, well, that's all part of the story. That's
Yeah.
right. And it's so. I tried to do that as much as possible because the story is really about the boy's imagination, and in this story, the girl is the calm one. The story was based on when I went to camp, the day camp. There was a place where we all would eat lunch up in the redwoods in California, and one of the picnic tables always had bees around it because it must have been a hive nearby. Everybody would sit as far away from there, and the boys were like, bees, 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 or overreacting. And one of the girls, named Amy, which is the girl's name here, she would go over and put some food in her hand and feed the bees. And all the boys were like, whoa, whoa, you know, she's braver than us, you know. But the boys were afraid it was going to happen, and so they wouldn't go near it.
Do you have to wait until the text is read before starting the animation?
No, you can interrupt it.
And how do you did you see what the effect of the kids? Do they steal for the text be reading, or do they track with an animation?
We want we wanted to leave it optional because we had the varieties, and I'll show you how to set those. Here's, in fact, this is the example I was going to show. Is that so? I'm in English, and if I every time I restart the page, if I make you listen to the whole thing, and sometimes they're 3 sentences long, or more or longer. If I was changing languages, it would be a problem. So if somebody wants to come in here, wants to know what time is, we can actually just switch over to Spanish, or for you, switch over to French.
Yep.
And that the opening animation still happens, and I can interrupt it, see, and it stops. And now I can just go up and.
Good.
So I wanted to make it so that they can switch languages as dynamically as possible. It's not quite as fast as the other program, where it's instantaneous, but it's pretty fast, and they can get back and forth between the languages. So that was one of the features. These are all the pieces that we added into the product, and I'm going to jump back to the options page. So we added a whole section of teacher resources because we wanted them to, how to use it in the classroom. There is a whole teacher's, 40-page PDF about activities in the classroom, and but we here's the settings, and I don't have my glasses on, but you can. We have bookmarks and the patience mode, and the patience mode is where you have to listen to everything. So if you have kids who are ADD and the whole idea is to get them to sit through it, there's some teachers that wanted this. And so these are mostly things that the teachers asked for. Story completion means that you get the whole piece of the story in the beginning without being interruptible. It also means that when you come to the end of the page, and sometimes there's a little thing that leads you into the next page, and that also gets played. And we even have a feature that we don't, you can highlight the hot spots for teachers. So they can actually go and turn the hot spots on and go through the product when the kids aren't there and know where everything is. It makes them the go-to person for all, our little buttons are hidden. So, and then we did add more storybooks in here and more languages. And I'm just swiping through. And so this is the in-app purchase part of it. And because they stuck me in here too, which I'm very grateful for. We went through a lot of changes about wanting to do this in a way, because the original Living Books course didn't have that. But we wanted them to be able to know there was more and to be able to get them. And in the same way here, they could add more languages. So, but we put it back at several layers back, and we haven't had any complaints about it actually, and I thought we would, but so I'm glad about that. Okay, I'm going to get out. There's a whole set of parental tips, and
I'm sorry. Can we see the parental tips?
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to see what's different between them and the teacher.
It's things like don't feed after midnight.
That's
And
right.
Do you always create something separate for parents and teachers?
Yes, we do. They're slightly different because the teachers have different requirements or interests, and this is about how to play with the individual words. We're giving the parents tips. I'm a strong defender or supporter of parental involvement in storybooks, and that's why it's important for me. One of the things we include in here is that there's a hidden spider on every page. We tell the teachers about this too, but for the kids, for the parents, this is something that they can do with their kids, is try and find the spider. Did you find the spider on the page? And so there's things about how to talk with your kids, about imagination, and each one, this book is about imagination. But in another book, if the teacher trouble book, or the spelling, there's a whole other set of kind of guides to parents to bring up conversations that are related to it.
So, do you think that the parental tips seem more about the more like a dialogic reading experience, and then the teacher it seems to go like more into
Yes.
okay.
Learning.
Yeah, we had
It's a
educators.
joint meeting.
Yeah, we had educators help us. I mean, we have these 40-page documents on how to use it in the classroom with spin-out activities.
Right.
But this was just for the parents. And you know, I was at a conference in LA years ago, and Mattel was talking about their research on girls and boys, and the room was a huge room, 500 people was packed. And as I was sitting there, this beautiful woman came by and slipped me a note, and I went, oh. It doesn't happen to me very often. And I opened it up, and it was she said, "Thank you. My mother and my daughter sat and played Just Grandma on Me for 2 hours, and I could hear them both laughing in the other room together."
Aww,
and she was just thanking me for the experience. And so that's why I really care about that parental piece of trying to hook the two, and also why we put paper books in the box. And that was somewhat a trick that I'd learned from Carmen San Diego, because they included an atlas. And it wasn't that they ever used the atlas much. The kids mostly looked at the flags when they were playing the game. But the parents thought the added value of the book was a why to buy. Although it costs a lot to ship it. So, yeah.
Like what we were talking about.
The packaging of the digital with the print. Or
and curriculum and sort of that information, just to give them confidence that it's actually curriculum based, if that's the purpose of what you're doing.
The other thing we're starting to see, just coming from Bologna Fair, is books that have the triggers, either some sort of code or image that triggers the app. So there's a dinosaur book coming out where you point your iPad at the page and the dinosaur jumps off the page and you can sort of see attributes. So that whole connection between app and print is starting to blur, and I think will probably blur more because of the fact that all these kids have cameras in their pockets.
We did a lot of experimenting with words in the Living Books.
Welcome to Living Books.
I don't know how many people know Jack Berletsky.
Today, I'll be your guide.
You mean person?
Well, no, as his work. I think he was the first children's poet laureate and for the last couple of years. It's a new title for the U.S. He's got about 70 books or so. And I don't have this working completely because we kind of ran it through the engine a ways back, and we're still waiting to hear about whether we get the license. But I'm going to show you just a little bit of Tilly.
When Tilly ate the chili, she erupted from her seat.
And it's running slow because it's an older version.
It's also going through Apple's TV.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. So this came out of an idea where my boys were in 3rd grade, and they had a great teacher who made them learn a couple poems every year of their choice, and then they had to perform them from the whole class. And so I was thinking about poetry and poetry pieces, and I was trying to talk the company into letting me do this, and they said no. And I went ahead and made a prototype because I found Jack talking, and then it turned out they flew me all the way up to show Jack the prototype to see if he'd be interested, and I stayed at his house with his wife, who was a former librarian, and I set it all up, and he sat down and I played it for him, and then he was just quiet. And I thought, oh man, my goose is cooked, you know. I made a prototype and the CEO told me don't. And then he turned to me and he said, will you marry me? I thought, oh yes, okay. So
yes.
I said yes, but he was already married, so I wasn't worried. And
clearly that was the only issue.
that was really the main issue. But Jack is hilarious. He's a natural-born performer, you know. And you go to, he's often at the ALA and all these other reading groups because they all know him, and he plays guitar and sings and dances his songs all at the same time. But this is a reverse. The black and white style is on purpose because that's the way the book was done. All the drawings in the book were taken from this. I had an old Disney animator who loved to work on paper. He hated working on the computer, and he did this whole book on paper, and we scanned it in. He was so much faster. And But the difference here is that in all of the living books, all of the regular books, you click on the objects and they trigger something. Or you click on the words and they just say themselves. But here, it's like a living dictionary. So all of the verbs, all of the nouns,
Tilly
identify themselves. I'm clicking on Tilly. Oops. Oops. Oh, that one skipped.
Tilly,
So court
Court,
and street.
Street,
That's great.
Everything. Let's see. Down.
Down,
So it's actually playing out what they are. Again, are we scaffolding here? Is it scaffolding? And then water.
Water,
Okay, now you're laughing because that was a surprise. This is where the surprise comes in. I could have just had a glass of water, I could have been really literal about it, but taking it somewhere else where it wasn't supposed to go. Not only did the nouns, but then all the verbs also did their pieces. So gulped.
Gulp,
Pieces are missing here, but you get the sense of And in some places we had to put the words together.
Dreaming,
Yeah.
And the poems are hilarious. Now I got dinged because in reviews because this was all in black and white. But the idea of it was that all the objects would become color, so they highlighted themselves, and we were able to keep. We were dealing with the publisher who wanted us to keep the look and feel the same. But, yeah.
This is good to say. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the different genres, which is everything. You can't judge Shakespeare against a picture book. The answer is they have different purposes and different audiences and different things you're showing here. So.
And we found that
really
this one
nice.
actually worked with an older age group, whereas the other they played with it more. And because so many of the words created animations, that when they began clicking out of order, they're making up their own sentences. But when they got to the end of it, and it said 8, they would go. They turned around to us when we were testing, and they go, "Did you see that? Did you see what I made it do?" So they assumed that the particular animation that showed up when they built a sentence was based on what they had done. Now, of course, they were hardwired; they were all the same.
Right, but I love that they're sort of being prompted to make predictions, which we know is a great comprehension strategy. 'Cause
That's right.
They're probably looking and pointing at particular
Right.
words that they have a hunch are going to have
Right.
some good animations.
And some of these are songs. So there's one about 40 performing bananas, and there are about a lot of bad puns about have a lot of appeal and all that sort of thing, But I've had 500 librarians singing it at a conference. And there's another product that I can't show you because I don't have it running. Was the Sheila Ray the Brave by Kevin Henkes.
Yeah.
And my sound designer said, I want to make a musical. So she wrote these great songs. It ought to be a stage play. It was more of a girls' product because it was about Sheila Ray and her sister and Louise. But then you had a mode where you could go down and you could play just all the songs. And the songs you could change languages from Spanish to English right back and forth real quickly. And we had a boy we had a bunch of boys come in and test it as long with the girls, because we always have a mixed group. And this one boy was like, how did you like it? Okay. It's like nothing. He wasn't giving us anything. It's like, and his mother's going, she's feeling kind of weird, that he's being so flat with us. But we want honesty. That's fine. We wondered how it would work for him. So they leave, and an hour and a half later, the mother calls us and says, okay, he's standing in the middle of our living room, dancing around the floor, singing the song. There was a song about a cat on the fence who goes, I'm hip, I'm up, I'm doing the bop, And he's actually dancing the whole moves from the songs. And so we've seen this again and again, where they're embodying the songs, they're embodying the dance, that opening dance sequence in the beginning of like Little Critter or Arthur, those pieces. I really put that in there because in the early days when you had it in the store, I needed an attract mode because nobody else had that. Their products just had a screen up. So we had music and we had a character dancing, and it was great. And but then we heard from the parents is that the kids were all learning to do the dance. And they would learn the whole set of moves. Sometimes they're a couple minutes long. And, you know, and they'd say, oh, do the Arthur dance for Aunt Sally. And these kids would get up, put on the music, and they'd do the whole dance. So we were seeing them pick it up and embody it and learn these things in different ways.
How
Do the chili peppers mean anything?
Oh, they light up. Oh, the chili peppers. The chili peppers are so you can do one line at a time.
Okay.
That was just because I wanted to help kids learn without having to do the whole poem. They could just do one line at a time.
Okay.
Can you interrupt the read-through to hear the dictionary, or to trigger the dictionary? You wait for the read-through to go, and then you can go back and...
There's no dictionary.
I mean, not the visual dictionary,
Is it clickable,
the,
right?
the images. The
You
images.
can turn that stuff on and off. All
You can, okay.
Yeah. I have it. Most of them I have it set to be interruptible,
Right.
and just because I know how kids are today. So.
When you redid the Arthur books, did you integrate with the television content? Or
Actually, the television came because of my books.
Right,
I was
so they drew from you. So
I was the first one to give Arthur a voice. In fact, I bought Mark Brown his first multimedia computer and took it to his house, set it up for him.
so did you? But when you redid, did you have to make any changes subsequent, or did it all?
No, well we couldn't. We can't actually touch the art assets. That's why that was part of the reverse engineering process. Okay, use interesting content. If it looks tappable, it should be. Support the story. Highly responsive. Keep animations short. Save room for surprises and empower the user. Okay, so Warren asked me to talk a little bit about audio. This is an example without hearing it. It's a brain-based joke. When you hear something that's not what it's supposed to be, and it's a square peg in a round hole, a categorical mistake it's called, and kids, on the first page of Just Grandma and Me, there was a place in the tree where you clicked on a tree and a bird flew out, and he hung a loop and he flew back, he kind of buzzed over the cow's head, and the cow moved and he went back in the tree. And I had to demo this thousands of times to groups in Macworld and everywhere else. And there's a place about 2/3 of the way through the movement where about 1/3 of the audience would go, and I kept wondering about that, and what it was that instead of a bird, what we had was an airplane sound. And the brain's trying to make that as a categorical mistake, and it doesn't quite match up, and so it's like a kind of joke telling. And that square peg in a round hole. And it happens a lot of times, but I'm bringing it up to you guys here because you can do it deliberately and get some humor out of it. Sometimes you do it and you don't know why it works for you. So, audio is the carrier of emotion. We know that about music in the movies. You know, I used to always say to my kids, oh, look up, here comes the cellos. As we're in a movie and the cellos come on, you know something's going to jump out and get you because they're doing that long bowed stroke. And then they're going to go, get you. So I used to warn them. But it's also because of voice. Because we're trained from a very young age to be tuned to the subtleties of voice. And you can change, all in how something is said. Because somebody could say, hello! And it's like, that says don't bother me. You're bothering me, but yes, I would acknowledge that you're here. Or you could say, hello. It's like, come closer. And that's the same word if it's written. But the emotional content is in the audio. Audio is second in terms of visual in our input. Humans are primarily visual beings. Some people say 80%, 70%, 75%. So what that means is we're taking in the most information with our eyes. And the audio is coming in through the side doors of our head. And we're often not conscious of it unless it's somebody speaking or it's music or something. It's like all the ambient sounds that are going on here, the people in the kitchen, people rustling and writing. We don't hear any of it. We tune it all out and we just kind of focus on the one thing, mostly it's visual. But what happens is this is where you get those audio jokes. And Louis leads to the next piece, I'm sorry, is that good audio makes poor graphics look better. And this has been proven at Stanford and at MIT, where they ran rather expensive studies. And really scratchy images that had really high fidelity audio, everyone said looked better than the ones that were the other way around. It doesn't go backwards. Good audio, I mean, good graphics don't make bad audio. And that's because it's coming in the side door of the brain, it fills in our illusion of what's going on. And so you can get away with a whole lot of good audio in simple drawings, as long as the audio is good. So it complements the illusion of reality and place. It really lets you fill in the blanks. That's why you want to have that little bit of ambient stuff going on that tells you, oh, I'm in a haunted house, or I'm outside, or I'm in the city, or just enough to carry it so that you can be immersive in the environment. And audio is the cheapest form of animation. And this is another trick that a lot of people, oh, animation is so expensive. In the same way that when you're dealing with text and you have that piece about the text is the best software because it decompresses in your head. It's the same thing happens with audio. You imagine it going on. You imagine what the next thing is happening. So a lot of times we can animate. Sometimes, you know, there's something happens with two characters and there's a big thing going on. It's expensive and time consuming to try and make that happen. So what we do is we have the character get knocked off screen. You hear bang, crash, boom, meow, all these sound effects, and then the character staggers back into the scene. And you imagine the whole thing. On the first page of The Tortoise and the Hare, he runs around the house, you hear him brush his teeth, you might hear the toilet flush, and we're all doing all the sound effects, and yet the kids go, you ask him what happened, oh, he was brushing his teeth. You know, they're filling in all the blanks for you with the animation.
I would also add that I think, I mean, it's funny because I asked you about your dictionary and you said we don't have a dictionary, and you absolutely have a dictionary. I would say that audio is a great way to sort of implicitly extend learning, because it's a great way, you know, just a sound effect. If you have the word slurp and then the underscore, the sound effect is actually a slurp, you've just defined the word, you know, and that's exactly what you did in the Prelutsky poem. I mean, you were actually using audio and very simple visuals to define the words on the page. Yes. Which is pretty amazing.
And that's what we were trying to do with Noodlewords.
Yeah.
Because I call them onomatopoeimations. But most people just look at me and go, what? You know? But they're actually animations that do what the word is supposed to be and sound like. But audio often gets short shrift. Short shrift. But it actually is really more important than you think, especially if you're picking up the language and tying the two together. So when I see products that have reading and don't highlight the words, I think they didn't take the time to do it. And that's why we were so painstaking about actually making sure that the sentences followed the individual words, so that when you rebuilt the sentence, it sounded the same way emotionally. And it was a pain when you're in 7 languages, but I still felt like it was worth it, you know.
So 2 quick little examples of one is in Tokaboka and Tokaban, the first menu. You can hear, it's about a band, a rock band. You can hear the crowd very quiet in the distance, as if you're approaching this grand stage. And then the start button is like a heartbeat pulsing. It's a big round circle in the center with the forward arrow, and it's like just a slow pulse. And that's really bright. It's the only thing you could possibly touch. So it gives that anticipatory set that Madeline Hunter would talk about, that you just feel like it's setting the table. Then the other one is World Book. This is back in a CD-ROM that Software Mac Kiev did. Their first menu was like tiles laid in water, and they were floating. So you start it up, and you see these like these pieces of paper floating on the water. And of course, what does a kid do? He sees water. Splash. So splash, 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 splash. And you could just play with the menu the whole time, but you know, it gave you that control that it was alive, living. And then Bob Hughes calls it the hunting dog. A good menu is sitting there alert, waiting, but waiting, like a spring ready to jump. And so all these things are tricks, all in the first 5 seconds.
Right. I feel like being a play designer, I'm always thinking about how do I create an invitation to play? what is the invitation that makes me want to come in here and try this? And if I can communicate the invitation better, then the kids are going to be there. They're going to come and try it. And then how do I keep them engaged? It's a whole other set of pieces. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, the power of surprise. I talked about this just a little bit before. Over and over, I've seen this to be more important in so many ways than you could imagine. There's 10 different kinds of surprises, and I won't even go into them because that's a whole other talk. But you can have insight, you can have shock, you can have awe, you can have, as we'll see, humor. And so the first thing it does is it sparks interest. A surprise is that thing you were looking for when you came in the first place. Surprise me. Surprise me. What flavor is this? What does it do? I mean, anytime that you show something to a child, the first question they ask is, what is it? What can I do with it? And so they're ready. So I want to have, if I know that's what they want, then I want to have something there that offers that to them. And the nice thing about surprises is they aren't predictable. So they don't know what's going to happen. The killer for me with most educational products is it's predictable. This is good for you. I'm going to run your head through this. Now do this, now do this, now do this. Don't give the kids any control, and don't allow them, there's no surprises. Warren uses the term accidental success, thank you, accidental success. So surprise is just, it's an incredible piece. It causes disequilibration. I still can't spell this without looking it up every time, but because my word doesn't think it's a real word. but
disequilibration.
Disequilibration. See, I need it phonetically, but this is such an important part of that's. I think surprise is often what throws you off. It can be challenge. Challenge can throw you off, and there's other things. But for a lot of it, it's just the surprise throws you off. It's a psychological arousal. They call it something else too. And then you also get intermittent reinforcement with surprise. So it really plays into a lot of Skinner's work in many ways, because you can have something that's fairly boring, and what happens as kids is that they think, okay, I've seen this, been here, done it. And that's why I always throw surprises into Noodlewords. I put it into everything I can, because once they think they've seen it all, they're out of there. Okay, I've done it, that's what that does. But if all of a sudden something else funny happens, then they'll stick around. When we were at JuniorNet, one of the things that we did was I did a program based on Bear in the Big Blue House with Henson. We got to go. The most fun I ever had in software was shooting the Muppets on the soundstage.
Oh, that's cool.
They were so hilarious. My cheeks hurt for days just from laughing. But we had a card game called with Tutter the Mouse. And Tutter's about, he's real small. And we had him here, and it was all in video, and then you were playing cards with him, and every month we would give you new faces on your cards, so you're playing a slightly different game. But it was really designed for the younger users on the site. But because we were tracking who all the kids were, we were getting the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds coming and playing regularly because it was so much fun to play with him. And some of why it was fun is because he surprised you, because you didn't know what he was going to do. You took a card, he just might go, oh, that's my favorite card! Get all upset, oh, I got a good reaction. And sometimes he'd go, oh, wham, and he'd disappear off the screen. It didn't happen very often. And he was, and the kids would laugh hysterically, and they'd play for another 45 minutes trying to get that same response. That's where intermittent reinforcement comes from. So you go along, and you just get to where, they're just about, okay, I've had about enough here, and then you go, oh, there's more here. So that's what you're adding renewed interest through surprise. And that's part of why it's so magical. It also implies that there's more going on. Oh, I don't know everything that's going on there. Oh, there's more here. And they will invent more and tell you what's in there. I'm always, for years and years, I've had people come and tell me about the, how in Grandma and Me, about the artificial intelligence. that we had built into our program. And I never declined. I always just said, oh, thank you. But there wasn't any. They just happened to click here instead of here, and they got a different animation, but that wasn't always the same animation. And so I knew that that was a big plus. And the other thing about it is that it's really the basis of all humor and storytelling. Let's see if I got the picture here. And when I was first studying surprise, I didn't think that was true. And then I realized, okay, well, what makes a joke funny is the twist at the end. The bigger the twist, the funnier the joke is. It's not what you thought it was going to be. Same thing with storytelling. You watch a good storyteller, and they take you down the road, and then they turn it on its head, and that's what makes you laugh. The nature of it is that you project into it what you think is going to happen. I know where this is going, I know where this is going, I know where this is going, and then it flips. There was a clown was talking to a kid at the circus, and a friend of mine saw this, and he said, you know, the clown's there's a group of kids, and he's asking the kids, well, what's your favorite part of the circus? What's your favorite part of the circus, you know? And the one kid pipes up and says, I like the elephants. And the clown says, yeah, they're my favorite too. They're the best kissers. And you just watch the kid's head explode, because first he'd imagine the clown kissing the elephant, and then himself kissing the elephant, and then, you know, he's trying to integrate the information. So he took it someplace else, told a joke, you know. But it's, you know, that categorical disequilibration that throws them off keeps them really involved. And so again and again, you know, this is the good stuff. This is the magic that makes products really funny, is learning how to add little touches of this in there that keep it alive and interesting.
By the way, that's on page 5, disequilibration, and the art of confusion, it's called, a little insert box.
Right. Or on page 222 in my book. Sorry. Okay, so we'll come back to Noodlewords. And I'm going to show a little bit, but I'm going to put these up for you first. So I really think the interruptible piece is important. Sometimes you do want to, you know, if you're doing storytelling, you might want to make them go through the whole thing. That's the goal. But if not, if the goal is to allow free play, then everything should be interruptible. They might miss something the first time. That's okay. You know, I'm not going to force them to find everything. In fact, I don't want them to find everything the first time. I want them to be surprised when they come back, when they think it's going to do the same thing, and it doesn't do the same thing. Warren said this yesterday, and I agree, bubbles must pop. And it isn't just that bubbles must pop. It's that they need to pop now, and they need to be big, and they need to be satisfying, and they need to sound wet. And recently, I went to a meeting about doing some consulting, and with a company that's got a lot of money behind them, and they're moving. We've got this interactive thing going, which I can't talk about. And as he's talking to me, he shows me a page with bubbles on it, and I played it, and I went, oh. I said, so these are on mouse. These are on finger up. And he said, what? I said, these are on finger up. So there's a delay. If you hold your finger on it, it doesn't pop. It's only when you take your finger off. And if it's a bubble, it should be instantaneous, so it's finger down.
Yeah.
And then he's going, oh. And he didn't know that. And that's how I get consulting work. Because right there, it got more satisfying just by making that shift. And when you're testing, as we found in Living Books and we found here, and I'll show you that there's a lot of tricks that when all of a sudden you're finding kids are doing things differently than you expected them to. Or they're looking for different things than you expected. Like the kid with trying to catch the fish, move the fish around with the mouse. Finger up or down. And you want to be consistent in use with most of those kind of controls. Because they're actually interface controls, not you're not all of a sudden, you know, it gets tricky if you all of a sudden throw something really weird in on them. It feels too inconsistent, I think. Although there's some places for that where it can work. Keep animations short. And I'll show you some examples of how we change that. And I think everyone really needs to know their target age kids. I think this is the other huge mistake, is that we always, like we were talking before, oh, it's kids. But boy, that 3-year-old and the 6-year-old and the 8-year-old and the 12-year-old, those are all kids. They're all under teenagers, and yet they all have totally different desires. You know, some of them are really about skill building, and some are about collecting, and some are about socialization, and some are about just exploration. And you can't, there's no one size fits all, it fits none. You're going to end up with a mush product. You have to really define yourself. And you look at Nick and Disney and those guys, they start out with the 7 and above. And you have Disney and Disney Junior and Nick Junior. Because if you do the first one, if you're successful in the under 5, you can never migrate up. Because when the, you know, the kids under 7 are primarily right hemisphere. So they're still in the, we call it the magic years. So your Rangers on the Roof and Tooth Fairies, they buy it all. And it's also, it's the fun part of childhood for parents too, because there's still magic in the world. And it gives parents a sense of magic. And, but so understanding those differences, I lost my train there. So anyway, I'm going to switch over to Darren and just talk about Noodlewords for just a minute.
Saying there's also a lot of research that anything's learned with humor sticks and stays longer without less repetition.
Never step on a banana peel.
That's right. Oops.
It's so funny.
You gotta
That's
turn it
bad
upside
video,
down.
but the audio is
I
very
didn't
funny.
touch
It's
it,
really
dear.
funny. It's these two adult men.
I'm turning it the opposite way.
There you go.
Okay. And the audio's on?
Turn it up.
It's hilarious.
Okay, now we're
I've gotta
okay.
watch it.
This
I'm
one
sure
doesn't seem to
I
do
will.
anything.
I'm gonna write myself a note.
So,
It's like perfect examples of this
Yeah,
audio.
he has to turn it up on this.
oh, okay. You don't have to turn it up much.
This?
So if I don't touch this, it'll do that. Now that's subtle. That didn't cost me anything. That was like the programmer, okay, move it a few degrees. But what it says, oh sorry, what it says is that I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. And there's this piece about, in the magic years particularly, that it's part of our hardwiring. It's why the ancestors saw spirits in the trees. The trees were alive, the rocks were alive, but anything that moved particularly had a spirit. And there's a kind of animism that happens with any object that moves. It attracts us, and we go, oh, it's alive, what does it do? And it's just like kids, when the kids find that bug, and they reach down and they want to, is it going to jump? I'm going to touch this bug and see, you know, get a stick, I'm going to touch it. Is it going to jump?
Isn't it called animism, or is there,
Well, there's
a word for...
they're very closely. They don't come from the word to animate. Yes, one is, there's animism and there's, you know, I can't.
Well, the point is that children really want things to be alive.
Yeah.
And if they see a leaf blowing, or, you know, to an adult, we just assume that, but children really do.
It's Captain Leaf.
Yeah.
It becomes a character.
It becomes things, and they see the moon, and the moon is chasing a cloud, and that becomes, and that's
right. When you're at the beach, and the moon is always making a direct line to you.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
I was already thinking about this, and then I saw where Piaget was talking about it in the same terms.
Anamorphic? Somebody's got to know this.
So,
Anthropomorphism.
Anamorphism. Anthropomorphism.
So,
Anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism is when you give something human qualities. But I'm talking about the sense that it's actually something that is alive. And if it's alive, then I can have a relationship with it. And so what I'm always trying, I'm trying to have a relationship with text. That the text is alive. And the text has meaning, and there's meanings behind the words.
That was group cognition we just did, by the way.
That was group cognition.
Collective intelligence.
So when I was building this, you know, I wanted to make it so the simplest thing, the kids could just tap on it. Anybody could just tap on it. And I also want, each of the bugs has an animation. They have their own animations. His name is stretched, so he's got a good one. There's a button between them, each of them has their own. He just has a little stretch, and then there's a third stretch that's between them, and then sometimes there's a fourth or a fifth that you don't always see. And when we were testing, we had kids come in and go, they're shooting it around, and then the first thing the kids want to know is, well, if I do this, what happens? So I had to go back and make them knock the bugs down, because that was their expectation of what would happen. And when I first was building it, there's bump. Now again, here's the audio. Kids don't hear that. They barely hear the word bump. But every time they touch it, every time you touch the character, every time when that's on the screen, it's going bump, bump, bump. And they will hear the word bump 20 times just by playing with it for a few minutes. But they're so focused on the other part of it that they don't realize that they're absorbing the relationship between the two. And so we were doing this, we had to get our bump going here. Had to make the buzz move a little bit. So we thought, okay, this is great. And I had older kids come into the testing, because one of the things I was going to build was I wanted a way to extend the play. So we thought we were going to have more of a physics engine in there, and I was going to have a place where you could pull out that green screen. You're supposed to be able to pull out 3 things and have spin and jump and bump together, and then you could have them trigger each other like a Rubik's Cube, or a Rube Goldberg machine or Amazing Machine, and get more playtime out of it. And so we were discussing that, and I had a couple 8-year-olds come in and that were playing with it, and one of them said, well, on this page, if there was a red ball floating around in here, and I could hit the ball when it got in the right place when I went to bump it, and then it would make the ball go crazy around the screen, that would be cool. And I thought, wow, that's a brilliant idea. Simple, easy, I could do that. Except, he was 8 years old. And the 8-year-old wanted a different kind of gameplay. And the 5-year-olds, who are the people who are my target market, the kids who are trying to make that, they're the emerging readers, they said, more bugs. They didn't care about the ball. I told them about the ball. Yeah, but what about the bugs? More bugs, more bugs, more bugs. Okay, so I had to go and spend a lot more money making 3 times as much animation because that's what they wanted. Another thing that happened was, you click on the box and you get a word. And it's actually blowing, my voice is making it blow across the screen at the moment. And so, you can move it around. So, but what happened was that, this was my first experiment in making something that was about finger touch. So we got swipe, and we got taps, and we got dragging it around to get things to happen.
Pinch.
What? We don't have pinch. We've heard that a lot of kids don't use pinch, and
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so I didn't put it in there. We considered it. We didn't have anything that really worked with it, and we have a lot of autistic kids who have more. We're big in the autistic market, as it turns out, and that whole thing about putting the page turners up at the top. No, In fact, you have in Living Books, we kept even though you can swipe those pages now, we still have the page turners because that's all they can do is with impaired motor skills is hit that button. But what they were doing was this. They were doing rapid tap. And that was, no one ever talked about rapid tap, But we kept seeing it over and over and over, and it would crash us every time. And the programmer said, I can make that go away. And no, I said, I want the crashing to go away, because that's an inherent play pattern that they're inventing, and I want to support their inherent pattern. So it took him a while to figure it out to not crash. And then what we found, so we were having kids, they treated it like the Wheel of Fortune. And they're going, I got grow. And we kept saying, oh, okay. So now they've invented a game out of it. They thought they were playing roulette and getting their own words. And it's like, okay, they're making games that I never thought of it. I never thought about rapid tapping. But that's where you have to watch your kids when they're doing it. And it's funny, I thought this was like one of the more boring ones in here. Because it's less interactive. And for a lot of kids, it's the most popular. And it's totally simple. It's just pieces that show up in layers. And
But just freeze frame this for a second, because this progressive seriation, it's another real powerful kind of way to build feelings of control, and with the unknown at the end, the thing you were saying about surprise, I think that's one of the reasons you want to keep doing that. This is the flowers appearing. It's a real powerful mechanism. We reviewed a book called, it has the word Emily in it, an ebook. That, you know how you flip the page and then it throws a bunch of stuff at you, right? Well, this one throws just a dot. That's all you see on the page. You touch it, you touch the dot, and the first part of the picture appears, and you build the picture, and then it becomes an ebook. I thought that's just a brilliant idea. And so this is masterfully approached.
Is it random?
No, it isn't. You just, every time you tap on the word, it just grows the next piece. And but when we were almost done with the product, we realized we probably should have a tutorial. So we created a movie that's in the very beginning, and you can click out of it after about 3-4 seconds, where all the characters come in, and we have a bee, Bitsy the bee comes in, and she's my daughter's voice. The bugs are my grandkids, and our sound designer. And but she says in the tutorial, "I'll be hiding inside. See if you can find me." So it's a little hook if you go through that part, and she's here on the next click.
Grow.
The one after it. Let's see.
Grow.
So she's hiding in several places, and so kids come just for that. You know, they want to come. They'll play this again because they know that's where she is one time, and she's in a lot of other places. And then what we found with this screen was this was originally to pick all these other pieces, and now we weren't using it to build these other games with, but we kept them individual because kids were doing this.
Spin. Sparkle. Dance. Jump.
They were just playing with the words, you know.
Bum, 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 bum.
And we made it so that, you know, it's an interesting problem for my programmers because I said, okay, I want the bugs to each have animations that are tied to this. So you have to load and be ready to play instantly each one of these words so that when they hit shake and they hit the little guy, then they get an animation. You know?
Adorable.
And there's one for him too, but if, you know, I can switch over and surprised. And so the whole piece of being move over and keeping it all up was an interesting set of problems. Even to get stuff to animate this well was the hardest part. And I'll just show you two more because a lot of you have seen this before. But bump was an interesting one for us because when the characters bump, this is a long gag. I think it's too long. And it was even longer before. It was really cute when the animator sent it to me. He's following how I had it written, but it wasn't the piece. So now, actually, when you click on the bug, sorry, that's a different one. That's the same one. The buttons are here. They're on. See my fingers? The buttons are on the outsides. So clicking out here, that's the right speed. No, I want to be able to just. I want them to just bump each other. And, you know, bang, bump. Let's get the meaning. Let's put the meaning of the word in there. Make it happen. And the kids love that. And then, so we realized we got our bumping going, and we get it close to them. It makes them bump their butts, which is just hilarious. And then we had animations at the end where they go, "Oh, that kind of hurt," and they fall out of their chairs because bumping butts. You know, what else could be funnier to kids? So these are the kind of places where we're going along, and we have to keep modifying little pieces to make it faster, to make it more interesting, to keep them involved. And it was the surprise of that kind of thing. And then, you know, the other thing that we had a lot of fun with them was that playing with this the piece of what can we do with the words. This is a word that's hard to translate into another language because I had to hand animate. Whereas bump and those other ones I can just drop a word in and the code will do it automatically. So it's an interesting sort of problem.
Ate your group.
That's right. Well, the characters burp actually after they eat. And then, you know, and then dance. So we're getting kids dancing. They put it on the floor, and they do that. They jump, they dance, they do all these different things. And if I shake this, I can change the music.
Oh, that's fun.
And so it's kind of, there's 3 different pieces of music, and you know, there's kind of a city ghetto kind of piece, and there's, you know, other ones, and then we made this the adult part.
That's a surprise. They don't know to shake it.
What?
You have to figure that out to shake it.
Well, that's where I'm going. So this is not, kids go here, they go, oh, I'm in the wrong place. It's all words. I don't want to be here. That's on purpose. And in the tips we have, there's about our philosophy here, and but under the tips for parents, it tells you where all the good pieces are. So that you can blow on the side and make the word blow go by, where some of the pieces are hidden. I forget what else is in here. Shaking it to change the music. There's a whole bunch of little tips to make it happen. And we wanted the parents to be the go-to person. How am I doing for time?
Getting close.
Okay, good. So the sort of go-to piece, and we turned out to be really wonderful with reviewers, because we didn't have to tell them, oh, be sure and see this and be sure and see that. We just said, go to the parents' tips. And then they could go in and they'd make notes and go try everything themselves. And at any time you could always get back out. So I'm going to switch back, Darren.
All right. We have a Skype coming up in about 15 minutes.
Okay.
So I want to make sure we get some questions in and also give people a chance to stretch.
Okay. I'm as soon as he gets me back there, I'll wrap it up. So I think we talked about most of these things, and so engagement is the goal. This is what we want. We want that happy child that's going, whoa, you know, that's mind blown, that's wants to do it again. Let me show you this. They want to show you what they got. They want to show the next. They want to show the little kids, and they end up teaching themselves more by teaching the little kids. These are all pieces that we really think is really important. And so I'm remembering the audience, you know, as a developer and concerned with Roy, we're always thinking about, okay, well, you know, you've got clients who want these things, and you have to reach these learning goals, and we have to meet these revenue numbers, and we have to do this. And often the kids get lost in the process. And I think some people don't even have kids look at their products before they put them on the market. When I look at them, I'm going, what kid ever played with this? And because they're my design partners, they teach me what makes it alive, what do I have to fix, and what not. And so to wrap it up, we have start with great content, look for opportunities for interaction, support kids' curiosity to explore and play, value the story and the text. Don't forget the text. And most of all, have fun.
Good.